Let's begin with our top story coming in from Japan. Amid rising tensions between China and Japan in the East China Sea, a Chinese academician has said that Beijing's offer of reducing its naval presence in the area was snubbed by Japan. By promising reduced maritime activities in the disputed waters, Beijing had offered an olive branch to Tokyo, but this attempt was snubbed when Japan hired fishing boats to go into the disputed waters, resulting in skirmishes between the two sides. China has been increasing its maritime activities in both the South China Sea and the East China Sea over the past few months. The Chinese academic, however, said that China most likely will not escalate tensions with Japan at a time of increasing tensions between China and the United States. A few months before Chinese President Xi Jinping was due to visit Japan in April, Beijing had reportedly reduced its maritime activities in the Senkaku Islands in East China Sea. According to security experts, China is starting to actively challenge Japanese control. Japanese lawmakers, in the meanwhile, are urging the government to hold joint defense drills with the United States in the East China Sea to strengthen Japan's control over the Senkaku Islands. What is this dispute all about? Let's get in a sense of perspective from our guest, Professor James T.J. Brown, who's joining us live from Tokyo. He's an international affairs expert. Thank you, Professor, for joining our broadcast. Now, considering Japan has already nationalized the Senkaku Islands back in 2012, can China even afford to escalate tensions with Japan, and why so?
Well, it's the big issue between Japan and China. These islands are certainly considered by Japan to be under their control, but that level of control really depends on who controls the waters around the islands. And that's because they are uninhabited, there are no security personnel on them, there are no buildings on them at all. So really, it's a competition between the two sides to see who can maintain a presence in the water around the islands. And in recent times, we've seen a big increase in the presence of Chinese ships, with a presence in the contiguous zone around the islands for 111 days in a row by Chinese ships, really raising Japan's concerns that China is really trying to take control of these islands.
Right. Professor, can the proposed US-Japan drills help in containing Beijing?
So it's not only between Japan and the United States where there have been interesting developments. Of course, the Japan-US alliance has existed for many decades. What's particularly interesting in recent times has been the expansion of that bilateral relationship towards the quadrilateral relationship involving Australia and India as well. And with upcoming talks between the foreign ministers of that quad, what we're beginning to see is that it's not only the US and Japan with increased security cooperation, but with Australia and India becoming more involved as well in really trying to push back, at least cautiously, against Chinese perceived aggression.
It's interesting that you mentioned that this security cooperation has moved beyond US and Japan and in fact includes the Quad. This news at the same time arrives at a time when China is holding simultaneous military drills in 4 seas, including South China Sea, and it is the simultaneous nature of these exercises which is very rare. What explains China's rapidly increasing maritime presence?
Well, China now has the largest navy in the world, something that they're very proud of. They are also seeking to demonstrate that they have the capability to not just focus on one confrontation at a time, but have the ability to take on several adversaries at once. Now, critics might say that this is a clear sign of hubris, that China is not at a level of strength that perhaps the leadership believes that it is. And ultimately, by taking on so many countries, taking a confrontational stance towards so many countries at once, China runs the risk of actually uniting all of these countries against it.
Right. And since you speak about this risk of uniting all the countries, let me also come to another aspect of it. The Chinese government plans to reopen talks with 10 Southeast Asian nations on a code of conduct for the South China Sea. Why does China suddenly want rules for a disputed sea?
Well, we have to be a bit cautious here that the indication is a willingness to reopen talks. That's very different from actually concluding an agreement for a rules-based arrangement. So what is China doing around the South China Sea with those ASEAN nations? Well, it looks like at the moment that they're seeking to bring some more of those countries on side. There might be a recognition that China, whilst initially having done very well to build closer relations with the Philippines, with President Duterte at one stage announcing a separation from the United States. In more recent times, the Philippines have swung back a little bit more against China. So it could be that Beijing is now thinking that it needs to take a slightly softer and more accommodating